Welcome to the latest episode of Sports Bazaar. I'm Mick Malloy. I'm with Titus O'Reilly. Where you left us last time was, I believe, with the birth of the America's Cup. Is that a fair
absolutely.
point to say?
It had been bestowed to the New York Yacht Club.
Yeah.
This trophy named after the yacht that had beat the British
By Queen Victoria.
By Queen Victoria. So it's now called the America's Cup, and they put out a challenge to the entire world: come and try and win this cup. This is it.
Come and get it if you think you're good enough.
Yeah, and they're saying it to, they want to promote competition, international racing.
And they've got a deed that clearly spells out the rules.
It's called a deed of gift. It's with the New York Supreme Court. It's lodged, so it's very much like this is the
Everyone knows the terms.
So it's all set up, ready to go. The Civil War then breaks out in America. We're talking 1860. 1861 to 65, real pesky little war for the Americans.
So what happens there?
That just stops the racing idea. Yeah. Everyone forgets the America's Cup exists. The idea of the English and the French are staying out of it. It's all the French get involved, but the English stay out of a lot of the Civil War. So the idea of racing each other and things like this is it's not in anyone's mind.
It's on the back burner.
So it's been the worst timing. They invent the America's Cup, and then for the next 5-6 years, everyone forgets about it. So what we're going to talk about today is how it could have just gone away at this point, but forgotten. But one race reinvigorated the idea of yacht racing and competition across the Atlantic, between the two countries especially. And it was in 1866. It's the autumn of 1866. And this race itself has nothing to do with the America's Cup, but it's a lot of the people that are involved in the New York Yacht Club.
Yes.
And a financier, George...
Forgive me, is this now
Civil War. This is not 1866. The war's just finished.
Hazy on the
Civil War.
haven't quite boned up on the...
So
something about Gettysburg. I don't know.
So the Confederates, we'll just say, the South technically lost.
Oh, no.
Although they're fighting they're fighting a rearguard action now. But
I don't think it's over, to be honest.
That's right. It never really ended in a way. But so technically the war's finished, and it's the autumn of 1866. So the war's now in the rear view a bit there, and a financier, George A. Osgood, and a tobacco baron, which is always good to have a tobacco baron involved, Pierre Lorillard,
I was wondering when you were going to introduce a tobacco baron.
They're having a very enjoyable dinner, they describe it, at the prestigious Union Club, which is the one Commodore Stevens invented about the same time he invented the New York Yacht Club. Are these the same
members of all these clubs?
They're all the same people.
They're all the same people.
Yeah, it's all the same people.
Club to club.
It's all the rich people. Now, they're both having this dinner, and while they're having this dinner at the Union Club, they're both, the equivalent of billionaires today. So this is like if Jeff Bezos was having dinner with Zuckerberg or something, right? It's like that. And they're boasting about the merits of their yachts. And they're saying, who do you reckon's faster? What do you reckon's got a better yacht? Typical bloke stuff.
Yeah.
And
it's a pissing competition between rich people.
And they say, you know what? I think the way we settle this is we have a race across the Atlantic for money. So this is two American yachts going to race across to Britain, and this is at a time...
back or just across?
No, just across. And this is at a time where crossing the Atlantic in a ship is still really dangerous.
Yeah.
Right? This isn't like, sort of just
a done deal.
Popping across, It's like, these are things. Now, this creates a huge stir, the idea that they're going to do this, because people have never raced across the Atlantic before. The yacht crossed it to go race, but it didn't race. It just leisurely went over. Racing's a different thing. So this is like racing to the moon or something at the time. This is like, all the papers and everything say this is amazing.
Yeah.
We're going to cover this. A 25-year-old guy by the name of James Gordon Bennett Jr., he learns of this race, right? He's only 25 years old, but he's very rich, and we'll get into his history because he's a character you're going to like.
All right.
He's desperate to be in it. So he persuades Osgood and Lorillard to accept his ship, the Henrietta, as a third contestant.
So these guys don't even have ships yet?
Some of them have ships. They all have ships.
Yeah, but are they racing their own ships?
No, they hire crew.
No, my point is, though, when they made the bet, did the ships exist?
Yes. Yeah. They all had these big ships, and they all let's race it and see whose is the fastest. Right. And Bennett's got one called the Henrietta, and he says, I want to be in it. And so the amount they're betting on this race swells to $90,000 US at the time. That is the equivalent to $15 million US in today's money on this single race.
Yeah.
So it's winner take all, 3 races. The difference between all of them is James Gordon Bennett Jr. at 25 years old. He's going to be on his ship during the race.
Yeah, he's revolutionary.
Yeah, he's not like just the backer. He's like absolutely on it. So they go and they race, and the Henrietta with Bennett's ship, it wins the race in 13 days, 21 hours, and 55 minutes.
Okay.
So
By much?
By a couple of days. He does really well, and this means he becomes well known. James Gordon Bennett Jr. becomes well known. Sailing suddenly inspires. The British are following this race.
Yes.
Everyone gets excited about sailing again as a sport and as a spectacle and all this. Now, James Gordon Bennett Jr., he is a fascinating guy. Now, he's 25 when he wins this race.
Yes.
His father is well known in New York circles. He had worked in newspaper, James Gordon Bennett Sr. He'd worked in newspapers, and at the age of 40, he founded the New York Herald in 1835, and it was a paper which became the most widely read in the United States. So think of him almost like the Rupert Murdoch of his era. And he was the first to focus on breaking news in real time as fast as possible.
Yes.
So he was like, had reporters that went to the front lines in the Civil War and actually were there and sent back as fast as possible, breaking the news. So, and this was revolutionary. Before that had been sort of newspapers had been like opinion pieces and what people thought, or very like reporting on events months ago. He was like, no, we got to be fast and first with the news, even if we're not always accurate, he used to say. So he was very like the modern.
So it was the introduction of topical
news and being first and being a newsbreaker and all that. He was behind all of that. It was the favourite paper of Abraham Lincoln. He read it religiously because it gave the best coverage of the Civil War, he thought, and he often found out first from the Herald before his generals told him stuff. He was not the most beloved bringing in this tabloid journalism. So he sent his son, James Gordon Bennett Jr., who we're going to call Gordon from now on, and he was called Gordon. He decided, I don't want to be known as James Gordon Bennett Jr., because everyone knows my dad. I'll just call myself Gordon. And he actually popularised Gordon as a first name.
Which is a tough job.
I
wouldn't have thought that was...
Apologies to any Gordons listening. Yeah, but that's where it comes from as a name. He popularised. So Gordon...
Is the gin named after Gordon?
I don't think so. But Gordon's educated in France because his dad was so unpopular in New York, he sent his family to France.
Had to do a runner.
In 1861, he volunteered his new yacht, the Henrietta, which he goes on to race in the transatlantic. But before that, he volunteers to use it in the Civil War. He gives it to the US Navy as part of the blockade, and then he gets commissioned as a third lieutenant and serves on it.
Right.
And fights in the Civil War. He patrols Long Island, does all this stuff. In one part, he's involved in capturing part of Florida. So he was a action guy in the Civil War. He then, of course, enters, after the Civil War, the Great Ocean Race, which makes his name. And at 30, he becomes the Commodore of the New York Yacht Club. Youngest ever.
30.
So he's like, in sailing, he is top notch. He builds the most expensive racing and luxury cruise ships for himself.
Yes.
The most indulgent of these was the Listriata. It cost $17.8 million in today's money.
Yes.
It had a room on it that featured a large electric fan for cooling purposes. The reason was it was designed, this is this giant luxury ship, to comfortably house a cow. So he could have fresh milk, cream and butter while it's
possibly meat, depending on how it goes.
How good is that? He goes, I
He's
want
got a
fresh
cow
milk.
At the back.
He's got a cow in a specially built room with a fan to cool it. Apart from yachting, he organised the first polo match in the United States.
Good on him.
He paid for the English-Polish polo team to come over to teach them. He helped found the Westchester Polo Club, which is the first polo club in America. He organised the first known professional tennis in the United States. He established the Gordon Bennett Cup for international yachting and the Gordon Bennett Cup for automobile races.
Yes.
He funded the Gordon Bennett Cup for ballooning, which continues to this day.
Unbelievable.
Now, this is where you're going to really love him.
Yep.
While he served as Commodore for a long time, he earned the nickname the Mad Commodore due to his drunken exploits. Right?
Yes.
Now, where this becomes interesting is, like his father, he was all too happy to put into these papers stories of his own misdeeds and even play them up. He didn't mind.
He was up for it.
And so there's an element here where, there's sort of like the idea with Bruce Wayne in the Batman movies. He acts like, in day, he's this like idiot billionaire.
Yes.
But because secretly he's Batman, right? Gordon is like that. I'll play up my drunken antics and make myself look like an absolute fool.
Yes.
But meanwhile, he's the Commodore of the New York Yacht Club.
Yes.
He owns the most powerful media thing. He's inventing sports. He's making a fortune. He's doing all this amazing stuff.
Like me. Pretend to be a drunken buffoon, but in reality, doing a lot of serious work.
A lot of reading Russian literature in the original language. I'm sorry, I've let people know about that.
Cat's out of the bag.
So he was quite happy. So some of these, but a lot of the stories are true, but some of them we kind of don't know how much are true. Right. But they're fun to tell anyway, so we're going to tell them. One of his favourite things was to ride his personal carriage, horse and carriage, around the streets of New York at breakneck speeds in the middle of the night, completely nude. Right? Wow. This wasn't a rare occurrence. It was said that this was his favourite hobby, apart from sailing.
The ocean was good for him, really.
So,
okay.
He's doing all this now. It's not the safest thing, and occasionally he'd crash it. Now, most notably, there was a time, and this all got reported as well. This time he was fully clothed, but there was a young American beauty, Jenny Jerome, who was known as the most beautiful woman in America at the time. She was the daughter of the King of Wall Street, Leonard Jerome, and so he took her on a high-speed carriage ride. Unfortunately, he lost control and it caused the carriage to overturn. It could have killed them both, but luckily they emerged bruised, but fine.
Dodged a bullet.
Now, this is lucky that he didn't kill her or him in this moment, because I don't dare to say, but the entire survival of Western Europe could have been different if this had have gone the other way, because
I think you're over-egging that.
Janine Jerome would grow up to be Lady Jeanette Churchill, the mother of Sir Winston Churchill. He almost killed Winston Churchill's mother. Now, another example of his antics was one night he was dining at the New York Union Club, which is that very exclusive club, when a fire started.
Okay.
He was very drunk, so he jumped up and leapt into action, and he began directing the firefighters on how to properly tackle the blaze. Now, he's drunk and and they're all going, "You idiot!"
That would have been
he won't leave them alone. They get so annoyed with his help that they launch him across the street by spraying him with the high pressure hose. Right. The next day, Bennett had no memory of this even happening. He says, "Why am I wet? Why are my clothes soaked?" And someone says to him, "Well, last night a fire broke out and you were kind of a bit annoying to the firefighters." He laughs and he buys every firefighter in the department a brand new overcoat by way of apology.
Apology accepted.
Exactly. On another occasion, he lost a bet, and so he drunkenly rode a pony through the dining room of a Newport social club, prompting them to ban him from life.
Hey, he lost the bet.
He followed through. So he rode this pony through the dining room. They ban him. He then reacts to the ban. He reacts to the ban by buying the building next door, turning it into a social club of his own and inviting all their members to join.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Another time he tried to get a seat in his favourite restaurant.
Yes.
And they said, "Sorry, we're booked." And he said, "Okay, I'll buy the restaurant," and buys the restaurant.
He bringing his cow?
Yep. So
it's incredible.
Now, while it seems like he's sort of this, trust fund kid kind of acting like this, he's, like I said, he's very astute behind the scenes, and a lot of this is for show or for distraction, right? He used to donate huge amounts of money to charities often just on a whim. If he heard something bad had happened to someone, he's like, here's your money. Here's all the money you need.
Yeah.
During the Panic of 1873, Wall Street Panic, he opened a soup kitchen to ensure no one in the city went hungry.
Yeah.
Now, because he doesn't do anything by halves, the soup and the sandwiches handed out were all made at the prestigious Delmonico's restaurant. So he's not like just setting up
cucumber sandwiches and some.
So all these people are eating
Chowder.
better than they've ever eaten it. Like he gets the best restaurant in the city to make the food for the soup kitchen. Now he's a bachelor almost all his life, because why wouldn't he be? He's just having enormous fun. Later in his life, and this is well after all his various yachting stuff has sort of happened. In 1877, he is engaged to a prominent socialite called Caroline May, and then it's suddenly called off. And the reason it's called off, there was some debate, but generally it's believed that he turned up drunk at a party held at her family's house and urinated either into a fireplace piano or a house plant.
I'm going with piano. Please be piano.
While the other guests look on shocked. Apparently, the wedding is over the next day. The event gets Bennett listed in the Guinness Book of World Records for the greatest ever faux pas.
He'd wear that well.
We're now going to go back in time a little bit to when Bennett has just become the Commodore of the New York Yacht Club. Now, you got to remember, it was 1856 that they had been given the America's... 1857 that they'd been given the America's Cup.
Yes.
But no one's challenged for it yet because there's been war, the Civil War, and then no one's interested in it. So, with Gordon now as Commodore, they finally get their first ever challenge in 1870 for the America's Cup come through. And it's a guy by the name of James Lloyd Ashbury. Now, he is British, and he has been inspired by Bennett or Gordon's Atlantic race.
Yep.
And actually meets him and becomes friends with Gordon. And he says, I'll challenge. We'll have first ever challenge. So it's, it's a full 19 years after America had won the race back in there. And so it's a long time. Now, Ashbury is the son of the founder of the Ashbury Railway, Carriage and Iron Company of Manchester. And he's trained as an engineer, joined the family company. His father died. He's inherited all his business and various money. His health's affected by the polluted atmosphere in Manchester, so he moves to the coast and he takes up sailing, and he realises he's got all the money in the world, Ashbury, but he's not. This is a time when England's moving from aristocracy into these new up-and-coming, magnates who have factories and all this, but aren't seen as the aristocracy. They're new money.
It's industrialisation.
It's industrialisation. And because he's not a marquis, he's not a duke, he's not landed gentry, he's got all the money in the world, but no one... None of the connections. He realises if I take up sailing in a big way, I can join all these exclusive yacht clubs and it starts to legitimise him.
Yes.
So he decides this is what he's going to do. So he decides to join the Royal Thames and the Royal Harwich and all these sort of things. He writes to the New York Yacht Club and says, I'm challenging for this. I want the America's Cup. So they say, great. So the 1870s American Cup, he sails over in a yacht called the Cambria, and he's on behalf of because you have to challenge is on behalf of a yacht club.
Of a yacht club, okay.
And so he's challenging for the Royal Thames Yacht Club. And he starts to try and dictate some of the terms to the New York Yacht Club about how the race should be set up, because the deed is vaguish. It's only 376 words, the deed that says what it is. So he's saying, I've got the Cambria, you should choose a boat to race against me. The New York Yacht Club, and this is where they start to get a bit of a reputation for not always playing fair. They don't agree. They say, well, the America won against a fleet. You're going to have to do the same. You're going to compete against a fleet of ships, not just one ship.
For the right
to win. Right? So it's America's Cup now is one boat against another.
Yes.
They say, nah, it's your boat versus 16, 17, 18 of our boats. And he says, well, hang on, the America was part of a regatta where everyone was sort of equal. This is different. I'm challenging for a cup. They say, bad luck, don't come. He says, I'll come. He thinks it's unfair. He decides to come. They enter 17 yachts against his.
All from the New York Yacht Club?
Yep. and he's got one yacht, right? He's very unhappy about that. As well as being outnumbered, when they take off, his ship the Cambria is subject to like what's described in the paper as shameful interference by the massive spectator fleet in the confines of the narrow harbour. So there's all these drunk people on boats, and they basically get in his way. So he places 8.
Terrible.
Out of the 17 yachts. The America that had been the original yacht, it had been bought by the Navy. It was raced in this, and it came 4th, so it came ahead of him.
Right.
He's seething deep down. He thinks this is very unfair. But it's seen as a success because 100,000 people show up on the water to watch it. A reporter said, "This writer was an eyewitness and has no hesitation in describing it as a marine spectacle. It was possible for even the smallest boat to be close to the races at the start and finish. Almost everything that could float was there. Large steamers, ferry boats, sailing craft of all sorts. There was practically no business in New York that day." So this is like a
Captured
huge
the imagination of
success.
the town.
So Ashby's not thrilled about this, but because he's nice about it, he gets a great standing from sort of his sportsmanship and being kind. And so actually before he goes back to UK, he's feted and dined everywhere.
Yes.
And
so it's a win for him.
It's a win for him. The President of the United States, Ulysses S. Grant, has breakfast with him on his yacht. And he leaves the country saying, "I'll be back to challenge," and
How's
they say, "Great."
Back home?
He comes back home, and they are all, there's a lot of interest in it. But he comes back and he decides, he commissions a new yacht straight away called the Livonia. He says, "I'm going to spend a lot more money." But then he starts to think about it and goes, "They really were not nice to me." He starts to get angry.
Yes.
So 1871, he challenges again, but he decides that playing nice has got him nowhere.
Yes.
So from the very start, he starts dictating terms to them. He says, "I want a best of 7 match race against one ship, not a regatta, not a..." He argues that the deed of gift, the rules, are no good, and he asks for an interpretation from George Schuyler, who wrote them, who by this point is, about almost 70.
Yes.
He's the last surviving member of the original America Syndicate. He says, ask him what he thinks the interpretation of the deed should be, given he wrote it. So the New York Yacht Club aren't thrilled with this, but they go, okay, because Schuyler's so respected in the yachting community, they kind of have to. So Schuyler comes back with a verdict saying, "I think that any candid person will admit that when the owners of the America sat down to write their letter of gift to the New York Yacht Club," which is talking about him, "they could hardly be expected to dwell upon an elaborate definition of their interpretation of the word match and distinguish from a sweepstakes or a regatta." So he goes on about that. And he says, "It seems to me that the present ruling of the club to do a fleet renders the American trophy useless as a challenge cup." He agrees with Ashby.
Wow.
He says it should be best of 7 races between 2 ships.
Yep.
The New York Yacht Club are seething at this, but they have to accept it because he donated the cup to them, right?
The founding fathers.
He's the last remaining too. So Ashby wins this. So the New York Yacht Club say, "Okay, best of 7, 1-on-1. He goes, "Great." So he comes over, sails over. They then say, "We might swap what ship it is on the day." So you've got one ship. Depending on the conditions, we'll pick our own. So if it's light winds, we'll pick the best in light winds. If it's a calm sea, we'll do this. If it's a rough sea, we'll put another one in.
Unbelievable.
Ashby is like furious, right? Yeah. So they start racing, and he ends up losing the first 2 races to Columbia, a ship called Columbia. He then wins the next one, so it's 2-1. And Columbia's sails are all broken and stuff from racing. So they swap that out for another ship.
Unbelievable.
He then, those next 2 races, the next ship, the Sapporo, it wins. But so the New York, he says, well, they didn't follow the course properly, and he doesn't accept that they've won. The Americans are saying, well, it's 4-1, we've won. He's saying, I don't accept it's really 1-1, and I've won the last 2. It's really 3-1.
Yeah.
So he says, well, next day I'm showing up on the line, and if you've got a ship there, then good. If you don't, I'll sail the course and claim it as a win. They say, you're an idiot, you're dreaming, we're not doing it. Bennett, feeling embarrassed as Commodore, puts his own ship against him that day.
Yes.
They race, and I think Bennett actually wins, but then Ashby says, well, but that wasn't an official race, so official New York Yacht Club yacht. So technically I won that one too because I raced against no one. So it's going rapidly downhill.
Yes.
Thing. He writes a letter to them and says, I should have been awarded race 2. I won race 3. I'd secured 2 further ones. These are the ones that no one raced against him. So I've actually won the America's Cup. They say, no, we won 4-1. So they can't agree. He writes this furious letter to them. The New York Yacht Club, they ignore it. All they do is write back acknowledging receipt of his letter. Right? They then decide to cancel a number of trophies that he donated to them in the previous year.
Right.
So it's getting very petty. He goes back to England furious and convinced that the Americans are just cheating to retain the cup. So George Schuyler agrees with him, and he says to the club, you've kind of disgraced this. This is meant to be an open competition.
Yes.
It's not about you retaining it at all costs. Yes. If you keep behaving like this, it's going to go backwards at a rate of knots. You need to fix this.
Good on him.
Ashby writes a whole long letter accusing them of being cheats, which further...
Yeah.
He gets kicked out. He had been made the year before an honorary member of the New York Yacht Club.
He's kicked out.
He says if he challenges the cup ever again, he'll bring his legal advisors with him. He never returns to challenge for the cup. He decides it's not worth it.
That's enough.
He actually turns his mind to politics. He becomes a parliamentary, an MP for one term. He then leaves British Parliament and he pursues business opportunities and leads to disaster when he invests in the South Island of New Zealand for a sheep station, which doesn't make any money. And he ends up poor. He died in 1885 as a gentleman of no occupation. He took his life with an overdose of chlorodyne. So very sad ending to him. But his legacy is absolutely profound on the America's Cup.
It's a big story.
Because in the end, in the long term, he forced the New York Yacht Club to accept that the format of the America's Cup would be a challenger against a defender, 2 yachts across roughly 7 races. So he forced that. His treatment caused a coolness between the English and American yachtsmen that lasted for years. So the English didn't challenge again for years.
There you go.
It taught the New York Yacht Club that dealing so badly with challengers meant the best yachts didn't show up to challenge you, or the best clubs. So it forced them to change their behaviour a fair bit too. The lack of quality that would come to the fore in the next 2 challenges ram this home. And we might wrap up here, but when we come back, we're going to see the 2 weakest challengers ever to emerge for the America's Cup.
I cannot wait. They've established their attitude pretty early on in the piece.
Pretty early on.
That became their modus operandi for as long as you can remember.
Yeah, it was always...
Defence at all costs.
Defence at all costs. But they've pushed it at this stage that bit too far, and they've got to correct slightly. And we'll see that because in the next few, like I said, no one good wants to show up. So they get some very bad challenges coming.
I cannot wait. Titus O'Reilly, you've done it again. We will go again next week. Thank you, sir.